Hey everybody, Mike Naso here from IPR with the latest on the tropics. You can see this year's name list. Andrea and Barry have already been used. We are now, next named storm is Chantal. We'll see when we get that. You can see on average, where should we be? Well, we are in mid-June. We should be at one named storm or less, and we are up here at two named storms, something we shouldn't on average see until August. So we're ahead of the game, and it looks like an active season. And you can see throughout the hurricane season, things are typically pretty quiet in June and July, and then we have a huge upswing through August and September, and then a second peak around October and a little blip here in early November. So things will get active and fast. You can see throughout hurricane history from the 1880s, or the 1850s rather, all the way until now, we've had a couple of up and down periods. You can see this was a general up period, then we had a down, then we had an up, then we had a down, and now ever since 95, which was right here, we've been on this upswing, and that'll go down, up and down. It's natural cycles. You can see 1886, 1933, 1969, 1995 stick out as some very active seasons. So even back in the 1880s, we had these extreme hyperactive seasons, although 2005, if it were listed, it'd be up here because it was way past 25 storms. We were at 28. So I don't even think it would fit on the scale, which is appropriate for a season as infamous as 2005. Now, as we saw with Barry 14 days ago coming in, Western Florida is target in June. Also, the Western Gulf of Mexico systems crossing the Yucatan coming out, that could happen. For July, 2 weeks or so, when we start July, we'll start to see longer tracks. Claudette in 2003 took a track just like this. Dennis 2 years ago up into the Panhandle. And then Bertha back in 96 took a track that somewhat looked like that. So those seem pretty much like the typical tracks for July that you'd see with the prevailing winds. Looking out there now, the large tropical wave that left Africa on the 9th is pretty much disintegrated. This is what's left of it. You can see how far it made it. That's the last blip of convection. And there is a lot of wind shear still. But this area in the Caribbean, let's zoom in a little bit closer because that's the only interesting feature really in any basin in the world. We don't have a lot of storms at all. In fact, we have none. And it's been very persistent. We haven't seen any signs of a surface center anywhere down there, but the flow is like this to the north of the system, and there's a upper level low that's weakening and moving off to the west-southwest, and all that's working to help flare up convection, and it's been persisting. It's been down here, it's been flaring up like this, and one thing you look for development is persistence, and that is what we see with this system here. So if it could stay over water and maybe develop a circulation, you can see shears getting a little bit more favorable, waters are hot, we might see something form, but right now the models really aren't picking up on anything. Water plenty warm though, you can see, and still warming throughout much of the Atlantic basin. Now for your interesting hurricane tidbits today, I'm going to look at the return periods. Now basically what this means is say a hurricane hits in 1900 somewhere along the US coast, a category 3. You could look at the climatological return period to give an idea of how many years should go by before you see that type of hurricane again. Now, you could easily see that same type of hurricane the next year, but these are climatology-based return periods. So, for example, a Category 3 hurricane, let's say Hurricane Jeanne. Hurricane Jeanne in 2004 struck right about this area as a Category 3. Now, every 18 years you get a storm like that. So technically, the next Category 3 that hits the area should be in about the year 2022. Of course, we could get one this year, even though it's only been 3 years. But if you follow the climatological return periods, you could see about 18 years for that. So you can see the numbers up here, up on the Carolinas, about 40 years, about 80 years here in Georgia. You know, those areas don't get hit very often. And then 70 years in the Big Bend, while a meager 20 in the Panhandle. However, once you move into the Gulf of Mexico, note you should only get Category 3 hurricane in this area about once every 20 years or so, but we had two in 2004 and 5. Dennis, and Ivan. So you can't always go by these, but they are interesting. You can see once you head up New England area, but in about 70 years, you get a major hurricane up there, Category 3. And the Long Island Express was a Cat 3, moved on up, and that was 1938. So next year it'll be about the 70-year mark, and anytime after that, we'd actually, if we don't get hit in 2008 up there by a major hurricane, we'd be over the climatological return period, which for New England is certainly a scary thought. You can see up here in New Jersey and Delmarva, though, it is a much longer time span. Now, for Category 4 hurricanes, I like to use Charley because this is a great example, probably the best I've seen. Hurricane Donna in 1960 was a Category 4 near Fort Myers, and of course Hurricane Charley was a stronger Category 4 near Charlotte Harbor in 2004. That's 44 years difference. Now, if you look at Naples, about once every 32 years for a Cat 4, Sarasota once every 60 years. So Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers is in between 30 and 60 years. So that's about 40 to 50 years. So the time frame between Donna and Charley was 44 years. That's 40 to 50 years. So Hurricane Charley came right on schedule according to the Category 4 hurricane return period for that area of Florida. Of course, you could get it at any time. I mean, we could see the same type of storm come up here just 3 years after Charley, but it's interesting to note, I think you would say. Notice for a storm like Hugo, once every 110 years, and Hugo came right up the state as a Category 4 up there in South Carolina. For the Gulf Coast, we saw a couple of storms. First of all, Katrina was very close and possibly a Category 4 as it started to come on shore. We know it was. Of course, it made landfall. The center of the eye across the coast is strong 3. It's really a technicality, really, if you look at the damage. It was a major hurricane. But 65, 68 years in here for a Category 4. So Katrina definitely wasn't an every year type of hurricane by any means, but it certainly was intense. You can see further north you get, the less likely it is to get these type of intensities, which is why you're seeing 500, 400 year periods up here in Maine. Now, I know everybody's been waiting for the Category 5 storm. Now, Hurricane Andrew, 1992, it's been about 15 years. Every 33 years, this area gets hit by a Category 5 in the return period. We've only had 3 Category 5 U.S. landfalls on record, so we don't know what the actual rate is, and there is no actual rate because that's not the way hurricanes work. But again, for the return period, 33 years. So hopefully we still got another 20 years before another Andrew rolls in there. But again, it could happen, next month for all we know. If you're talking about the Big Bend area, it's very possible to get a powerful major hurricane like Ivan come up in this area, but it's rare. Typically, you have high pressure backing away, and it's rare to get a high that's built in just right to have a system come up into the Big Bend, but it can happen. You're at risk if you're in that area of the coastline. For the Gulf Coast, of course, Camille hit Mississippi right here. It's Category 5 once every 160 years. Now, Katrina came close to making a Category 5 landfall. If it hadn't weakened, it very well could have. And that's 160, 170 years in that region, and it had only been 40 years since Camille. So that's why you got to keep in mind that things can happen at any time. These are just certainly interesting, and I know you could spend hours looking at them and wondering what might happen. You can see 37 years for the Florida Keys, and of course that hurricane hit about 70 years ago, Category 5 in the Florida Keys. So we're about 40 years past the due return period for the Florida Key Cat 5 storm. Interesting things to talk about, although I would not be surprised if we saw a Category 5 hit Maine. Of course, I'm kidding. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. Stay tuned to podweather.com and IPR365.com.